from RHF or whatever, Rock Hard Fitness.
Yeah, so we're here today discussing Optimal Ice Alaska with Rock Hard Fitness. And of course, Rock Hard Fitness is from none other than Rocky Reeves, who I've got in the studio here today. Thanks for coming, man. Appreciate it.
Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, so I saw that come out here recently on a few of the hockey social media platforms. I shared it with a few people. And I know you and I have been discussing, the shortcomings of the Alaska hockey community. I've got 2 daughters that have been playing hockey and growing up in the comp community. And we just don't have what other people have. And I know this is a passion of yours. So, I mean, what's the breakdown of, I guess, just a basic history of you and a short version of, your hockey history and why you're doing what you're doing?
Well, I came from a golden era of hockey. I would like to say the 75 to 80 birth year. I mean, I know what I know. I know what I grew up in. We've produced a massive amount of talent that's come out of Alaska.
Here in Alaska, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And, it just seems like sometimes these kids get sent outside and then kind of sent to the wolves, and maybe it takes them a little longer to get that full development. And so I've always thought that there was a need for coming up with a well-rounded program that addresses, the on ice, the off ice, the preparation, the nutrition, certainly the mindset, the goal setting, how to frame this stuff, and then also maybe put it in a fun environment, because kids can get overcoached, I think.
Yeah.
And if they lose this idea of, I call it the fun factor. If this goes away, I mean, everything kind of goes with it, right? So I wanted to come up with something that was, one, it was a way to give back. 2, it's right in my wheelhouse. And, I've been a trainer for 25 years. So I've been working in the industry for 25 years. I've been working on my business for 20. So I've been kind of sitting on the outside.
And your education
in,
is training, nutrition. That's literally what your career goals were. That's
and still are.
Okay.
I just think after talking with you extensively about this, I and looking, with another view, not having any kids that, at all, or kids that are in youth hockey at all, I think my view is a little bit different. So maybe giving a 20,000 foot view, I think, is what these kids need. And to be really just to be an enhancer, that's really what I'm trying to do.
Well, yeah, and what I'll tell you is, whether it's as a parent or what I see with the same coaches year after year after year, is that at some point, right, the same voice ends up being drowned out. So, for these kids that want to go to the next level, and if we want to really create a scenario where kids aren't going outside as their default choice to really take that next step, we need to start providing the programs that ultimately haven't been provided here. So having a new energy, having somebody that can focus on some of the ancillary aspects of hockey, like nutrition, mental focus, what you're bringing to the game other than just your hockey skills. There's a lot of those things that I think kids aren't really understanding.
Well, I think there's a big difference between a coach and a catalyst. I mean, coaches are great. And I think coaches, once they get an idea of what this enhancement stuff is all about, I mean, they're going to love it, because the kids are going to be able to transfer this to the ice, right? I mean, if you're not using transferability, this whole thing goes away. So
what do you mean by transferability?
You got to have some harmony with how you train, so that it shows up on the ice and in their performance, so they can get this sort of enhanced experience, and a sense of accomplishment, sense of gratefulness, gratitude. It's all part of the growth process.
Yeah. Yeah, and I see the need for this type of program for a lot of these kids that ultimately, after COVID, the homeschool population skyrocketed. People weren't happy with what was happening in the school district. People got access to new programs. Computer technology changed. It gave people the ability to have more flexibility with their families and their schedules, so that ultimately, if a kid really is dedicated to their craft on the ice and the athletic ventures and training, it gave them the chance to have more time to participate in programs like this. Whereas you and I sat in a classroom for 7.5 hours a day, probably learned for 45 minutes of them, and frankly wasted a ton of time. So I have my own mindset of what your ideal client for this program is, but tell me a little more about who you're looking for, who this fits for, and who you think this, ultimately would benefit the most.
Technically it could be for anybody that either has a glitch in their schedule. I mean, homeschool kids are certainly somebody that we built this idea around. or the drifters, which are the kids that go to school half the day, and then
Yeah.
they're maybe online for the second half of the day, but mom doesn't want them on the couch all day. So,
Sure.
hey, you got to go over here, do a workout, talk about prep and, maybe nutrition, depending on what their specific needs are. I can get into either informal or formal arrangements with that. And then on top of that is the off-ice stuff too. So we get to merge it all together, roughly 3 hours of their day. On a Wednesday, it's hump day, right? It's this idea we just get over this hump. If it's a situation where they have a game that day, they come in, we just do some prep work. The goal is not to exhaust them.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, because you don't want to do too much, right? I mean, these
Right.
kids are already doing a ton.
Yeah.
You're well aware of that. You're definitely taking that into account on an individual basis, and that's part of why you want to keep it small, right? So
Yeah.
this is not a throw the net out and try to catch as many pink salmon as we can, right? This is a kind of scenario where, with that Alaskan analogy, like you're going fishing for kings on the Kenai and you're only going for the big ones, right? Like you're keeping this very selective. You want this to be something that is, of course, accessible to athletes of all skill levels for the most part, right? But it's really something that you want to focus on quality, not quantity.
Well, I'm going to meet each one of these kids where they are and,
Okay.
build them from there. So there's no cookie cutter stuff going on here. I mean, the drills that we may do, although may be fun in nature, I really want to give them those other looks that, even the coaches that I talk to say, hey, work on these things and work on those things, tipping the puck, batting the puck out of the air, all the stuff once they start building their baseline skill, the kind of things that would kind of be difference makers, I guess.
Yeah.
So we're going to work on a lot of that, keep it fun. I call it skills and scrimmage, but it's going to be, a little bit of both. And
Yeah.
then, of course, harmonize it with the off-ice stuff, and then teach them how to eat right, how to hydrate their body. It's not just what you eat, it's when you eat.
That's unreal. And like, that's something that is out there a lot right now, whether it's with seed oils or, a lack of water and frankly, just poison in our food in general. As a whole, the American population has to deal with that. And ultimately, busy athletes and families don't have a lot of time always to consider all those details. And frankly, again, going back to the same voice constantly, kids don't listen to their parents. So like having somebody, and we talked a little bit about a potential scenario, but like where you come in, they come in the locker room and you have a chance in the very beginning of each ice session to sit down and say, hey, how's your day going? What'd you guys accomplish this week? What'd you do versus what we talked about last week? Here's some, concepts of like healthy things you can eat. If you didn't eat, did you eat lunch? Like, touching on all those things and hearing it from somebody who has education experience and can relate to these kids is huge. So, I know that's one aspect you've talked about. And I personally think the nutrition and the mindset part is something you could bring a whole lot to the table for these kids with.
Oh, absolutely. I talked about timing, right? Like, I know what a typical kid goes through and what a parent has to deal with. And it can get a little bit contradictory sometimes, especially when parents are rushing to get them to and fro. There's plenty of ways that we can help them, like, again, get that 20,000 foot view, but also make it simple so that it can be applied, because it's not just knowledge, it has to be applicable.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, I wanted to wrap up just real quick with the thought of, making sure people are aware that you're coming at this with an angle that it's bringing something to the table that isn't available for the kids. Kids that have these afternoons free, kids that have chunks of time that ultimately they can get PE credit, they can get, this physical fitness out of the way, they can have the training that you can bring to the table, but also your hockey experience. Like, we can't not touch on that. I've played with you for a few years. Actually, I'll say that you've shared the ice with me because frankly, I don't have any business being out there when you're out there. But what I've seen, and one of the reasons I pushed you to do this, is that you have the experience, you have the education, but more than anything, like, you have the passion for hockey and a love for the game. And I see, whether it's the heads up way that you play, the way you try to make other players better, it's something that needs to be passed to the next generation. And a lot of these kids are missing that. So, just super briefly, if you don't mind, just kind of expand on that love of hockey and why this mixes well with what you both enjoy doing, but also your profession and the ability to pass that torch down to the next generation.
I think it's very important, this idea of each one teach one, right? I mean, I've been kind of working in the fitness industry mainly for the last 20 years. I've dabbled in training teams and individuals over the years that, just the off-ice stuff and then working this merge into the on ice stuff is sort of going to be a new thing for me, an exciting thing. But this each one teach one thing and paying it forward, it kind of embedded in my heart that it was time to maybe go ahead and just give this a go.
Yeah.
And every person that I've talked to so far, they just thought it was such a great idea. So I think
Awesome.
that this is what's driving me. Just sort of this pay it forward mentality.
Yeah.
And you can't just leave. You can't just leave it in your head. You got to get it out there and have other people, experience what you've experienced and give back to the community.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing what happens in the next couple of weeks. You've got the first one coming up next Wednesday, the 2nd, I believe, and it's at the O'Malley Rink, and we're looking at 12:15 showtime, 12:45 ice time, correct?
That's correct.
And then hour and 15 minutes on the ice, so that's till 2, and then you've got dry land training after that.
That's correct.
And working in the whole nutrition, fitness, mindset, all that stuff at the same time, and then, really being a catalyst and somebody the kids can follow up with and trust and learn from. And I'm excited to hear how it goes. Hopefully we can have you back and talk through some of the successes and failures. And then the other part of it too is I'm sure that, it'll be a process. You learn as you go, and it'll be something that you tweak. But I'm excited to hear in 3, 4, 5, 6 months how many of these kids have had great success and come back with good feedback for you.
Absolutely. That's the whole goal. The whole goal is to develop the whole athlete. So wherever it goes, I still think it's a benefit. So
yeah. Well, it's going to be good, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Look forward to hearing more.
Thanks for having me.